they would play it. It is Capital 100.4 FM. Harada's happy. Welcome to Detox. Schools are reopening, and with them is the alarming rise in substance abuse among students. Today on Detox, we're tackling a very pressing issue. How well equipped are our teachers and staff to navigate drug-related incidences in schools? And when we speak to the Zimbabwe Multi-Sectoral Drug and Substance Abuse Plan, which was launched last year for 2024 to 2030, which is supposed to be a strategic and comprehensive strategy for us as a country, how does it aim to address this growing challenge of drug and substance abuse in schools? In a second, you're going to hear from a headmaster who reached out with us sending an SOS. A Form 2 student at his school was caught with substances on the school premises. The child went home, and according to the headmaster, he misrepresented the facts.
Talks. Ndine chikoro munya phase 3. Chikoro ichi chidzo ndine dambudziko rakaitika pachikoro ipapo. Pane mwana mukomana mazera ekubva pa14-15 years. Paform 2 mukomana uyu akabatwa nemurairidzi achiputa madhiragi. Ata mwana ndokudisciplina mwana. Adisciplina mwana pachikoro saizvozvo. Mwana akaramwa zvokubva pachikoro ndokuenda kumba. Aenda kumba mwana ndobva asvika unotaura mamwe mashoko asina kunaka maererano nemudzidzisi. Mubereki ndokuuya achipopota. Takaedza kuti tienzanise nyaya pakati pemubereki nemwana nemurairidzi. Tikaona kuti mubereki akanga asiri kunzwisisa zvakanga zvichiitika. Patakatora vamwe vana ndokutaura nevana vai. Zvazveshuwa haasi wega ari kuputa madrugs. Anga achiputa neuyu neuyu. Vana vaide kubva tabvunza zvekare. Saka mubereki hazvina kukwana mupfungwa dzake kusvikira mubereki aenda kupolisi kunomangara. Amangarira murairidzi kuti akarova mwana wangu zvisina mvumo neni. Zvadaro murairidzi ndobva asungwa. Ndobva tangomanya kuti murairidzi abude. So tiri kuti titoramba here takanyarara iwo madrugs apinda muzvikoro.
And that is the question the headmaster is asking this morning. 0719 100 404. How do you think schools should proceed in such complex situations that are involving drugs, students, and the parents? And what do you think are the limits of the school's responsibility in cases where parental discipline is clashing with what could be legal and possibly ethical boundaries? How do you think schools can balance discipline, student welfare, and parental involvement while also still addressing the sensitive issue, which is the fact that this child is 14 and using substances in school? 0719 100 404. And for us to understand this critical issue, which is addiction, we want to unpack just how much awareness exists in schools, in the community that you're living, about addiction, its role, and how we can possibly address this. Do you think you, as a community member, as a parent, have the tools that are necessary to prevent this? And joining us this morning, we were hoping the headmaster would be here. He said he's on his way. We wanted to ask him further questions, which we will if he yes. Ben, good morning. Thank you so much for being on Capital. This is a very interesting program. How are you, Ben?
Good morning, Falake. Thank you so much for bringing me here. Thank you. Good morning also to listeners.
We also have our head of programs coming from the one place we know you can go to when you're struggling with substance abuse and you need help. That's Mbatira Pamwe Sober Living Space. We've got head of programs coming in as always, Tendai Daka, to help us understand a little bit more from a social point of view, social worker point of view, how exactly we're supposed to navigate this space. Tendai, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, welcome.
I'm also excited that we have a youth voice coming in. Let's say this person is representing the young people. He is a social worker, but is also going to be shedding light into what it must be like for young people in schools, like this 14-year-old who was caught smoking in the schools. You can introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, my name is Brian. I'm from Batrapangwe. I'm representing the youth and young students in schools.
Thanks, Brian, for being a part of our show. Now, whilst we're waiting for our headmaster to arrive, I'm going to start with Ben, right? when you are looking at this situation, could discipline mwana achiyo abatwa nezvinhu zvinodhaka kudii in your opinion?
Well, that's a very sensitive one, I think, with the trends and what's going on with the ministry and the regulations are repo. But yes, in a way, we can't say schools should just be quiet and we should just stand along here generation ijipera. So I think, yes, in a way, there's a proper channel to follow on how to handle such cases, how to deal kubatsira mwana akadaro. But I'm coming from this position where the child at this point is also a victim. When we try to look at it from that way, we would see we have a pandemic here, drug and substance abuse in schools, in the society at large. So yes, now we will talk about the channels and how to do with that and how to handle, how to help and assist Vana. But they're also a victim. We should also approach in a way kubatsira. But like you said, Munar Kutra in this case, and them being teenagers and then being in that maybe space kukura and everything else, it's very difficult to reach teenagers and adolescents. So yes, it's a proper channel, there are proper ways to follow and proper system to follow now to assist and do never.
Yeah. But muvunzo wedu unenge watiposheke mbichana. This is kuwisa from you.
Okay.
Because when we listened to the headmaster, he was talking about disciplining the child.
Okay.
In your opinion, could discipline mwana anobatwa nezvinodhaka? Kama akatodhakwa ipapa. Handiti washeta wangwa waita zvaita. What would be disciplining the child look like in this case, do you think?
Well, there has to be consequences. Some form of punishment there has to be there. And then we talk about behavior modification. From that point, so yes, we can talk about corporal punishment, but in this case, there should be some form of discipline. Now, the form of discipline, what you're saying is the consequence in terms of punishment, in terms of mwana isolated maybe in that space, maybe going through the whatever, and then we talk about them having an understanding on the consequences and decisions.
You use the word punishment there. Let's put that to the side. We're going to come back to that. But how much responsibility do you think schools have when it comes to issues like this? When it comes to using drugs, when it comes to getting sexually transmitted infections, for example, or even just not eating while pachikoro? How much responsibility do you think schools have?
Well, we're living in a very let's say fluid and changing state at the moment, where on one end to appreciate a voice to appreciate our rights and everything else, and the whole school community is changing, unlike the traditional setup. And with the new issues, the legislation and corporal punishment, where the changes are. And then at the same time, chikoro kana taptendesa vana kuchikoro tine tarisira kuti vana vedu vange vakachengetedzeka kuchikoro in any way. So it would mean kupinda kwema-drugs pachikoro. There should be systems to address that. And then school chikoro chine responsibility yeku address nyaya yema-drugs kuva students in the way they see zvinenge zviri proper, which is again led and managed by the legislation iriko from the Ministry of Education. Inostate kuti kana mwana achinge abatwa kana mwana achinge aita zvinhu zvisingatenderwi pachikoro anofanira kunge the situation inofanira kumanagwa sei inonge iri stated with the ministry and the legislation iriko.
Brian, I'll also ask you the same question there. How much responsibility do you think schools have towards your behavior as a student, as far as drug and substance abuse, as far as even contracting STIs, for example? How much responsibility do schools have when it comes to issues like this, do you think?
Obviously, schools, speaking of teachers, headmasters, they have a responsibility of managing issues like substance abuse, and they should have plans or policies in place. How do we approach a certain situation? And drugs, how are we going to deal with this? And so it's all about approach that you use, and under the influence of substances. And then you're telling me and Kuti, you have to punish that child in that moment. Kuti actually under the influence. That person is not in their right mind. So it's a matter of approach, and then parents and teachers should be working together on issues like that. So I think there is like my committees that involve my parents, so those cases, to bring up to that committee and see how we deal with it. There's a code of conduct, Pachkoro, and what does your code of conduct say when it comes to my issues of substance abuse?
It is Capital 100.4 FM. Harada's happy to this, Brian. As somebody who's in school, do you agree also? I think you kind of started speaking to this earlier. Do you also agree that schools should have some sort of policy that speaks to the idea of prevention or the behavior of students? Or you're saying, listen, ne content, ne general paper, ne agriculture. Zvinozoita mwana zvingaita aite chihwere azopedza kuti hazvinodhaka hazvinei nechikoro in terms of its curriculum, in terms of its mandate.
I think they definitely have something to do, right? It's their responsibility to raise awareness in schools. I think when I was still in school, right, we used to get maybe people from the police force coming in, teaching about drug and substance abuse, and we would sing like this famous song, "Stop Drug Abuse," what, and everything. So it's their responsibility, it's their duty to have policies, or even bringing in people that are involved in drug and substance abuse, helping to educate students at the school, and those policies should inform how they deal with cases of drug and substance abuse.
Okay. Tonight, I want you to come in here before we go through some of the messages that are coming from the listener. Do you also agree with that position? Brian highlighted the idea that they have a responsibility as far as awareness is concerned. Outside awareness, do you think the school has a responsibility? They're supposed to work on that behavior, because from what we've understood talking about addiction, it is a behavioral problem. So the question is, if we are agreeing that it is a behavioral problem, is it the school's responsibility to work on those behaviors, or it is not the school's problem? The school's problem, as Brian is saying, is the issue of awareness, is to let you know the consequences. But working on the behavior, it is not the school's problem. What do you think?
All right, I would say the schools are limited here when it comes to working with those behaviors. All right, because of course the school serves as a primary system for socialization. And when we say behavior, it is something that is learned. And since Pachkoro institution of learning, learning is within the mandate of Pachkoro, learning is outside the mandate of Pachkoro through my interaction and shared behaviors amongst my students. Again, the school has to govern such learning, because it's still within the learning.
So you're saying, in short,
I'm saying that the school should be involved even when it comes to awareness, prevention, behavioral change. But when it comes to behavioral change, they are limited, because the school kwanisa kusenza iri yega. In the case yemwana uyanditi, chikora chikwanisa kusenza chega, that is if mubereki asiri kuuyawo with the contribution. Anditi. Mubereki anofana kuita a role to play, the school anofana kuita a role to play. The challenge yatinayo apa ndiye kuti vabereki nechikoro havana kunzwisisa. But in the case yekuti vabereki zvese nechikoro we are on the same wavelength, then the school is limited.
Okay. Before Mertha comes in, because Mertha says, can I come in? What is that wavelength today do you think they should be on?
All right. Just the general understanding, pane problem. Because there was a problem at Kapachkoro. The school identified there's a problem, and it. Baba dila now in the way wakafunga kuti inokodzera.
Yokurova.
And it.
Yokurova.
And it. Asi wabereki. It's not clear kuti chavasiri kuwirira nacho, is it the approach yekurova kana kuti pane dambudziko remwana ari kutora zvinodhaka dokati.
Ryan, Tendai, Ben, to some extent, you are all saying the school does have a responsibility, and yet a toolkit that was released by the United Nations says the opposite. They maintain that schools do not have a responsibility towards behavioral changes of students, especially when it comes to substance abuse, especially when it comes to sexual activity in schools. They're maintaining that the school must come in terms of awareness, but when it comes to behavioral changes, it is not the school's responsibility.
kuti chikoro ndo basa racho to facilitate behavioral change. Then if we are going to separate that chiti chikoro chiri kufana kungo raise awareness chete, at the end of the day, what is the objective of awareness actually? Is it not behavioral change again?
All right.
So why are we running away from Taurati? It should be behavioral change.
I think that there's an issue for context and measure of behavioral change, because we have like in this space we have social workers, clinical psychologists. All those are trained and takes years of training to actually target a specific behavior and to modify ways on to not change what say. So there's also an essence in terms of behavioral change. What are we really saying when we're talking about behavioral change? Like from what he's saying, the whole school system and education system is a form of behavioral change. But then now being specific with drug and substance abuse, we want to specifically deal with drug and substance abuse, which is a pandemic, which is a targeted behavior. I think in that context, man, now from what has been hinted before, we now need to bring in specialists to then see how then we can then deal with that situation in that case.
Let's just take some messages and thoughts from you as parents. And as I'm getting to those messages, Tendai. So, nyaya discipline is, according to you, Tendai, as far as you're aware of the law, is the law, how do you feel about corporal punishment in schools? Let me put it that way.
All right, mutemo unoramba. And I agree. We should just abide with the law. Challenge iripo ndiye kuti chitwambe chatinopa kuchikoro ndechekutsvaga other ways yema positive and negative reinforcement zvisinei kurowa mwana. And there are many. Ndo patinopinda component ye behavioral change. Because behavioral change is all about negative and positive reinforcements.
Okay, all right. Here is a thought process that's coming from 3977. Take a listen to what she has to say.
So I think there must be a shift in their training because okay, let me digress a bit. For starters, so the teacher has to navigate a way around or his way around a young mother at morning sickness and the rest that is related to pregnancy. And manao yakaita madrugs iyeyo wamukutora nezvake madrugs kudhakwaka and mwana becomes a nuisance. How does the teacher cope up? The parents expect results for another class. Oita zvingani teacher, you know. Some of these legislations in kuregerera kwatinoita vana sevabereki and protecting zvisina puts a burden pama teacher untold, you know. Untold ngirikini suffering nita ma teacher in silence because they are not trained to be midwives or to be interventionists panyaya dzevana dzemadrugs. Havana those skills. So reaction ya teacher should be understood when it reacts in a certain way. Nemunhu ari kuita nuisance, you know. I mean, that is just by way of comment. I'm not too sure. Something must then be incorporated in their training if this is what is going to be legislative.
Thank you so much for your thoughts. We appreciate it. But it's very interesting that a child caught with substance abuse in school is being labeled a nuisance. And I'm wondering if this may have a bearing on how we understand what addiction is. Because as you're listening in 3977 throughout the show, one of the key things we've been learning, and I think Tendai sort of alluded to this, is that when you are with substance addiction, whether it is alcohol, whether it's food, whether it is sport, it is a disease. So would you say to someone who has epilepsy at school a nuisance? Or perhaps we as parents haven't gotten to a place where we see addiction as a disease. Let's just take a call. Good morning, welcome to Cafe Talk.
Morning.
Morning, how are you?
I personally, like,
yes.
I think, what is the core business of the teacher? Let us really zero on that.
Yeah.
We don't expect the teachers to be a jack of all trades. Kuti isusu tinodhampa nhamo dzedu dzese kune maticha because hanzi nditicha. ticha basa rake nderekudzidzisa
Yeah. Yeah.
and zvimwe zvese zvingatichichinjai tiende tione kuti how do we deal with that. But if we continue kuti the way my problems are coming and we continue burdening the teacher person, we will end up losing his core business.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for calling in. And I think that's actually what the UN toolkit is. I'm opening the document for you just now, is actually alluding to. That what is the core business of a school and the teacher?
No, we're not saying put the burden on the teachers, right? It's the school responsibility to have measures in place, right? I think some schools have got social workers in school, and it's the duty as teacher to identify the problem. And most of the times, and you've identified a child that is struggling with drug and substance abuse, and what do? Then you refer to the services that are available. So schools should have services available, mental health services, including social workers, even psychologists at school. Most schools, private schools, they do have social workers at the school. So we're not saying it's their duty to address those issues. They can help identify and raise awareness around that. Then it's the duty of specialists that are well informed when it comes to drug and substance abuse to deal with the child, like help the child, not deal exactly, but assist the child, help them.
So can the spare the rod spoil the child? These parents were wrong. The school must have a clear policy and share it with parents. Those who don't agree must ship out. Because a teacher is a parent in loco. If he or she sees fit to use corporal punishment, which is illegal, by the way, it is okay. So they are definitely going to go to prison. Or face the law. Please don't give audience to a minority who are promoting incorrect ethos. The same principles were incorporated in Western countries, and now this has led to moral degradation and generations being lost. Yes, one or two teachers can become rogue and hurt children or even kill by mistake. However, it does not take away a good principle which saves millions in lives. Should we want to promote the absence of having a teacher being a parent in loco and the ability to hit, we are just going in a path proven that culture and morality in children will go away. But interestingly, the law has already passed the stage. Our law as a country does not permit corporal punishment in schools. According to our law, but the question I want to throw at you, we're almost out of time, and our headmaster is here, but is not in studio, but is here. Are we saying as parents, and next week I'll actually go through with you it's actually called the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. It is the school-based education for drug abuse prevention, and they are very clear to say it is not the school's responsibility as far as behavioral change is concerned. We'll pick this up next week, but as you're listening in, are we saying the only way we can help our children is if we have corporal punishment? It is 11 o'clock. It's time for the news.